Giving you 2 weeks to pack, declared my mother-in-law with a smug grin. We've already posted the ad to sell your apartment. I smiled and showed the document. My mom left me 2 more houses. Their laughter suddenly stopped. Hello, before we start, tell us what country you're watching from, if you've subscribed to the channel, and if you've given it a thumbs up. We wish you pleasant listening. The teaspoon clinked against the saucer like a small bell announcing the start of a fight. Lorraine Peterson set down her cup and looked at me with a gaze she probably considered victorious. I was always amazed by her ability to look down her nose, even while sitting at the table. Taylor, giving you 2 weeks to pack, declared my mother-in-law with a smug grin, straightening her shoulders under her silk blouse, the color of beige. Silence hung in the kitchen. April light filtered through the window, playing glints on the old mahogany buffet that had been here since my grandmother Evelyn Rose's time. At the table, besides me and Lorraine Peterson, sat her son Andrew with his pregnant wife Alison. Alison's face showed awkwardness, and Andrew's eyes darted like a mischievous schoolboy's. We've all decided, continued Lorraine Peterson, laying out some papers on the table. Andrew and Alison need to prepare for the baby's birth. They need a good apartment. And you? Well, what do you need such a big place for all by yourself? Rent a room somewhere. You can visit your grandson. Your greed has let you down, Lorraine Peterson, I replied, feeling a cold drop of sweat trickle down my back under my shirt. You've forgotten one important detail. Don't be insolent. She raised her voice as usual, nervously fiddling with the strand of faux pearls around her neck. This is a family apartment, and we make the decisions here. I stared at the tea leaves swirling in the cup. 5 years ago, when my husband Samuel died, his parents tried to push me out of the apartment, but back then my grandmother was still on my side. Now grandmother was gone. 3 months ago, Evelyn Rose passed away quietly in her sleep, leaving me alone against this whole pack. I remember our last serious conversation. It was a February evening. Snow fell slowly outside the window, covering our old house, built back in the 1930s. Grandmother sat in her armchair, wrapped in the blanket I'd knitted for her 70th birthday. Tay, what I told you about the documents, don't forget. They'll come for the house as soon as I'm gone. Gran, don't talk like that. Listen to me carefully. The apartment is in your name. That's a legal fact, but it's never enough for them. They'll try to prove it was a mistake, that I wasn't in my right mind. She chuckled. I'm in my right mind, Tay. More than that, I've foreseen everything. I snapped out of my memories when Lorraine Peterson slapped her palm on the table. We'll give you compensation, of course, $500,000. Enough to get by for a while. She spoke in a tone as if bestowing a royal gift. Alison nervously stroked her rounded belly. In her eyes, I noticed a shadow of doubt and perhaps even sympathy. But she remained silent, submitting to the general decision. Tay, understand, Andrew finally spoke up. This is better for everyone. The child needs proper conditions. For the child? I echoed and stood up. One moment. I left the kitchen and headed to grandmother's study, where papers were kept in the old secretaire. I knew exactly what to look for. Grandmother had organized everything into folders, labeled each document, and even left brief instructions. Old school, war generation, everything in its place. When I returned to the kitchen with the dark brown folder, Lorraine Peterson demonstratively glanced at her gold watch on her wrist. Are we going to sit here until evening? We still have a meeting with the realtor. I smiled and showed the document, pulling it from the folder. My grandmother left me 2 more houses. Their laughter suddenly stopped, as if someone had pressed the stop button. What are you talking about? Lorraine Peterson squinted, trying to make out the papers I'd placed on the table. House number 8 on Cherry Street. I ran my finger along the lines. That's the one across the road from us. And the country house on Lake Michigan. And this apartment is in my name, not the family's. Here are the extracts from the property registry, the deed of ownership, the will notarized. All clean, legal, and indisputable. Pallor covered Lorraine Peterson's face, and Andrew nervously drummed his fingers on the table. This is a forgery, shouted my mother-in-law, but her voice lacked its former confidence. No, Lorraine Peterson, it's not a forgery. Legally, everything was arranged, during grandmother's lifetime, Just in case, here's the independent expert opinion on the authenticity of her signature and a video recording of the conversation with the notary. I pulled a USB drive from the folder. Very informative, you know. Andrew stood up so abruptly that the chair behind him toppled over. "Mum, let's go." He grabbed Lorraine Peterson by the elbow, who sat with her mouth open. "We need to discuss this." "Property on Cherry Street?" she whispered, still in disbelief. "But that's a fortune." "I know," I nodded. Grandmother was a wise woman. Alison sat motionless, her wide eyes darting from me to her mother-in-law. In her gaze there was astonishment mixed with some new feeling, perhaps respect. "Get ready," Lorraine Peterson snapped at her daughter-in-law. "And you too." But as all three headed for the exit, I gently touched Alison's arm. "Maybe stay. We'll talk?" Lorraine Peterson yanked Alison by the sleeve, but she suddenly straightened up. I'll stay. I need to rest," she said quietly but firmly, freeing her hand. "Taylor and I will talk about the baby." "As you wish," hissed my mother-in-law through gritted teeth, and she and Andrew left, slamming the door loudly. We were left alone, me and Alison with the child under her heart, whom they tried to use as a tool in the dirty game for real estate. "The tea is still hot," I said, smiling, "and I have grandmother's apple pies." Alison sat down, placing her hands on her belly as if protecting the future child. "I didn't know anything," she whispered. "Really, nothing." I looked at her more closely. Freckles stood out on her pale face, and shadows lay under her eyes from fatigue. Pregnancy was hard on her, that was obvious. "I believe you." I poured her fresh tea. They've always been good at keeping information to themselves, especially from those they considered incompetent to make decisions. Alison took the cup with trembling hands. "Andrew said it was just a formality, that you wanted to move anyway, that it's hard for you alone to maintain such a big apartment." She fell silent, realizing the absurdity of these statements. "And you believed him?" "I just didn't ask questions." Alison lowered her eyes. "Lorraine Peterson always decides everything. If you try to argue, it only gets worse." I sighed. In the 5 years since Samuel's death, I'd studied my mother-in-law's methods well. First small jabs, then open threats. Not a daughter, a stray, an outsider. Those were the mildest epithets she bestowed on me. But grandmother was always my protection. Evelyn Rose, despite her fragile appearance, could put anyone in their place with one word. "And what's that house on Cherry Street?" Alison asked quietly, distracting me from my thoughts. "You saw it when you first came to us." "The grey house with white columns and a bay window across the street." I went to the window and pointed to the building, visible on the other side of the street. A 3-story mansion built just before the war, number 8. "But isn't it divided into apartments?" "It is, 12 apartments. But the whole building belongs to our family," I corrected myself. More precisely, now to me. Grandmother inherited it from her father, who was an architect. In the 20s, they almost dispossessed him, but some old connections saved him. Then the war, then Reconstruction. Anyway, a long story. Alison looked in surprise from me to the house outside the window. And all these years she didn't share with anyone. Grandmother was very cautious after the attempts to seize this house and the apartment in the 90s. There were some shady stories with corporate raids. She told me they threatened her, tried to intimidate her. Since then, she didn't advertise her property and carefully chose whom to trust. "And she chose you." It sounded not like a question, but a statement. "Yes." I returned to the table and took a pie. Grandmother said I was the only one in the family who sees housing not as a commodity, but as a home, a place where people live, not capitalize assets. We fell silent. A car passed outside the window. In the neighboring yard, someone was talking loudly. Ordinary city life continued, oblivious to our dramas. "What are you going to do now?" Alison asked, carefully biting into the pie. "With the houses?" I shrugged. "First, sort out the documents, pay all taxes and fees. Grandmother kept everything in perfect order, but I need to get up to speed. By the way, several apartments are vacant, need repairs, of course." Alison suddenly tensed up, as if bracing for a blow. "They're going to kick me out, right? After all this, Lorraine Peterson won't forgive me for staying with you." I looked at her in surprise. Kick you out? From where? From our apartment. It belongs to Lorraine Peterson. Andrew and I live there. On the condition that, she trailed off, searching for words, that you'll breathe as she says I finished for her, and Alison nodded. Lord, she really keeps you in an iron grip. Andrew says there's nothing to be done, that we have no choice. He can't find a good job. Always some projects that don't pan out. And do you work yourself? I did, Alison stroked her belly. In a flower shop as a florist. But Lorraine Peterson said it's not serious, that we need to think about the child's future. I suddenly remembered our first meeting at Andrew's birthday. Alison had brought a stunning floral arrangement that only irritated Lorraine Peterson. Again with your brooms. But it was clear the girl was talented. You know, I leaned back in my chair. I have a proposal. At that moment, the doorbell rang insistently, sharp, unrelenting. I knew who it was. I think they want to interrupt our conversation. I smiled at Alison. Don't worry, now there are options. I opened the door. On the threshold stood Andrew with a face distorted by rage, and Lorraine Peterson, breathing heavily as if after a run. Release my daughter-in-law immediately, she blurted out, trying to push into the apartment. Lorraine Peterson, I calmly blocked the way. Alison decides for herself where to be. And it seems you've forgotten you're in my house. I didn't give permission to enter. You. She choked on her words. Mom, wait. Andrew pushed her aside and stepped forward. Tay, be reasonable. Let's talk calmly. I understand we started off wrong. Started off wrong? I chuckled. You came to evict me from my own home, and now you want to talk calmly. Listen, he lowered his voice. Mom got carried away, of course, but we can negotiate. These documents, maybe they're real, but we're family. We should support each other. In his voice appeared ingratiating notes that I knew well. That's how he begged Samuel for money for his eternal startups. Family, you say? I leaned against the doorframe. Fine. Then where were you when grandmother was ill? When someone needed to sit by her bedside at night, find medications, doctors, organize care? Where was your mom when we needed help repairing the roof at the house on Lake Michigan? Where were all of you when I alone sorted through piles of documents, paid bills, dealt with non-paying tenants? Andrew shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. Everyone has their own affairs, Tay. Can't drop everything. Of course not. I nodded. So now don't talk about family and support. You made your choice then. I'm making mine now. From behind me appeared Alison. She stood next to me, straight and determined. Andrew, I want to stay here a bit longer, she said firmly. Taylor offered me an idea about work and housing. What work? Lorraine Peterson interjected. Are you out of your mind? A pregnant woman should be at home. I want to go back to floristry. Alison spoke quietly, but her voice had an uncharacteristic firmness. And Taylor offered me an option with an apartment. A quite decent option, not that room in a shared house you talked about. What apartment? Andrew shifted his uncomprehending gaze from his wife to me. In the house on Cherry Street, a nice two-bedroom apartment on the second floor with a bay window has become available. Wonderful view of the park, high ceilings, quiet neighbors. I smiled. I think it'll be convenient with your child, and at a quite reasonable price. You're offering us to rent from you? Andrew looked as if I'd slapped him. Not from me, but from the management company. By all the rules, with a contract. No family discounts or favors, just business relations. How dare you? Lorraine Peterson exploded. My son won't be your tenant. Well then, I shrugged. Find housing elsewhere. By the way, prices in our area have risen 30% over the past year. Good luck. I wanted to close the door, but Alison suddenly grabbed my arm. Wait, she turned to her husband. Andrew, this is a good option. You yourself said we need our own place separate from your mum. Yes. But he glanced confusedly at Lorraine Peterson, who had turned purple with anger. No buts, Alison cut off. I want this apartment. I want a normal life for our child, without scandals and intrigues. Has her insolence infected you? Lorraine Peterson pointed a finger in my direction. Another couple of hours with her, and you've completely lost your manners. No, Lorraine Peterson. Alison suddenly straightened up, looking her mother-in-law straight in the eyes. I just realized there are other options. and I want to consider them. Andrew shifted his gaze from his mother to his wife, clearly not understanding what was happening and which side to choose. Tomorrow, he finally said. We'll discuss everything tomorrow. And now let's go home, Alison. I'll stay a little longer, she replied. I'll come in the evening by taxi. We won't wait, Lorraine Peterson snarled. And no need, Alison replied calmly. I'll find my way myself. When mother and son finally left, Lorraine Peterson muttering something furiously under her breath, and Andrew looking completely lost. Alison and I returned to the kitchen. Now you'll get it, I said. I've gotten it before, more than once. She shrugged. But you know, I suddenly realized I can choose. I don't have to just obey. I smiled. Grandmother often said, a home is family. It's not walls, but opportunities you create. It seems Alison was starting to understand that. Want me to show you that apartment? I offered. It's really good, though it needs repairs. I do. Her eyes lit up with a sparkle I hadn't noticed before. I really do. We crossed the street and headed to the grey house with white columns. The majestic building, despite the faded paint and some wear, retained its dignity. There aren't many such houses left in Chicago, with stucco on the facade, high windows, and spacious entrances where ceramic planters with flowers once stood, and mirrors hung in heavy frames. I've always admired this house, Alison confessed, craning her neck to examine the architectural details, but I never thought I could live here. Grandmother told me that during the war it was a hospital, I said, opening the heavy door with an antique key, and in the attic they hid conservatory archives. Inside we were met by cool dimness and the smell of old wood. A wide staircase with elegant railings led to the upper floors. The marble steps were cracked in places but still retained their nobility. On the first floor lives Mary Stevens, grandmother's former colleague, I explained as we climbed the stairs. She taught art history, now retired, sometimes gives private lessons. On the second, the vacant apartment and Susan Archer's studio. She sews theatrical costumes, a wonderful woman. Alison listened with admiration, as if I were telling a fairy tale. And who else lives here? Mostly old Chicago intelligentsia, professors, doctors, artists. After the economic reforms, many tried to buy their apartments, but grandmother didn't sell. Instead, she rented them at prices much below market, but with one condition: maintain the house's atmosphere, the atmosphere of culture, mutual aid, respect. No noisy parties, dubious guests, or criminal stories. Grandmother said the house should remain a home, not just a place to sleep. We went up to the second floor. I took out the second key and opened the door with number 5. Here's the apartment. The last tenants moved out a month ago. An elderly couple moved to their daughters in the suburbs. Inside, the apartment turned out to be more spacious than expected. High ceilings with molding, large windows in the bay overlooking the old Linden Park. Of course, no repairs had been done for a long time. The floral wallpaper had faded, the parquet creaked in places, and in the kitchen stood an old gas stove that remembered Soviet times. A lot needs to be redone here. I ran my hand along the wall where a small damp spot protruded. But it's such beauty. Alison went to the window, looking at the park below and the sky painted by sunset. I could make a workshop here. Floristry, of course, but maybe something else. I've always dreamed of my own business. In her eyes appeared that very sparkle, the sparkle of possibilities that had seemed inaccessible before. So you'd like to live here? I asked. Very much, she turned to me. If it's real, how much will the rent be? I named an amount about half the market rate. Alison gasped, but that's pennies for such a place. Grandmother's policy, I smiled. People were more important to her than profit. Of course, there are conditions. Contract for a year with renewal option, repairs at your expense, and you have to become part of the community, participate in the house's life, help neighbors if needed. Once a month, there are tenants' meetings where common issues are discussed. Alison thoughtfully looked out the window. You know, this is like how I imagined adult life in childhood, my own home, good neighbors, work I like. And Andrew, how will he react? Her face clouded. I don't know. He's complicated. Depends on what his mother says. You said he can't find work. Yes, Alison sighed, for the third year now. First some IT direction, then tried real estate trading, then cryptocurrencies. Now it's unclear what he's doing. Lorraine Peterson gives him money, but only for what she deems necessary, keeps him on a short leash. So I approached her and put my hand on her shoulder. Listen, Alison, this is your choice. I won't interfere in your relationship. But if you decide you want to live here, the apartment is yours with Andrew or without him. She flinched. You think without him? I think you should have a choice, always. We walked around the apartment some more, discussing how it could be redone. Alison got fired up with ideas, how to arrange furniture, what colours to use, where to put a work desk for floristry. She talked about the future nursery with such enthusiasm that I understood she had already mentally moved in. Then we stopped by Susan Archer, the neighbour on the floor. An elegant woman in her 60s with neatly styled grey hair greeted us in an apartment turned into a studio. Fabrics hung everywhere, mannequins stood, and patterns lay on a large table. So you're our landlady now? She smiled at me. Evelyn Rose said she'd pass the house into reliable hands. I'm trying to live up to her trust, I replied, introducing Alison. And you're a florist. Susan Archer perked up upon hearing Alison's profession. How interesting. I'm just working on costumes for A Midsummer Night's Dream. There are floral elements needed. Maybe you can suggest something. They dove into discussing theatrical costumes and floral compositions, and I watched as Alison transformed before my eyes from an insecure, oppressed daughter-in-law into a specialist whose opinion was valued. When we finally said goodbye to Susan Archer, Alison glowed with joy. She offered a joint project, she said enthusiastically as we left the house. I haven't worked on something like that since I finished school. Well, and you were worried, I smiled. We returned to my apartment and I called a taxi for Alison. While we waited, she suddenly asked, "And what's in the house on Lake Michigan?" "An old cottage," I replied. "It's closed now. Needs major repairs. Grandmother went there every summer until her last years. Said the air there is special. It would be great to restore it," Alison said dreamily. Good for the child to get out into nature. The taxi arrived and we said goodbye. Alison hugged me unexpectedly but sincerely. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me another side of life." After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, sorting through grandmother's papers and reflecting on the strange turn of events. In the morning, they tried to kick me out of my own home, and by evening I'd offered an apartment to the wife of the very man who wanted to evict me. Grandmother would probably have laughed. She always said life loves unexpected twists. The phone rang around 11 in the evening. I expected a call from Alison, but the screen showed the name of grandmother's lawyer, Vincent Michaels. "Taylor Thompson, sorry for the late call." His voice sounded alarmed, "but I have information that can't wait. Today Lorraine Peterson came to me with her son. They were interested in contesting your grandmother's will." I sighed. That was to be expected. "On what grounds?" "They say Evelyn Rose wasn't in her right mind when signing the documents. That pressure was exerted on her, the standard set." He paused. "But they have no chance, Taylor Thompson. Your grandmother and I foresaw everything. There are medical opinions, video recordings of conversations with the notary, witness statements, everything done legally. Thank you, Vincent Michaels." "I thought so, that they'd try." "There's something else," the lawyer continued. "They mentioned some pregnant woman, said she has a right to part of the inheritance as the mother of the future heir." I almost laughed. "That's Andrew's wife, my brother-in-law. She has no relation to grandmother's inheritance." "Of course. But be prepared they might use this line. Anyway, I just wanted to warn you. And also, Evelyn Rose asked to give you something personally when such a situation arises." "What exactly?" "Not over the phone. Can I come by tomorrow around 10 in the morning?" "Of course, I'll be waiting." I hung up and went to the window. Lights were on in the house across the street. Behind one window, the silhouette of Susan Archer flickered. She was probably working on her costumes. In another window, the figure of an elderly man was visible, writing something at a desk. History professor, as grandmother said. The house lived its calm, measured life. I looked at these windows and wondered what grandmother had prepared for me. What other surprise could she have left? And what awaits me in the coming days when Lorraine Peterson starts a full-fledged war for the inheritance? The phone rang again. This time it was Allison. "Taylor, sorry for the late call." Her voice trembled. Well, Lorraine Peterson is furious, says she'll kick me out of the house, that I'm a traitor. Andrew doesn't know whose side to be on. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned. "Yes, just a bit scary. She's yelling that she'll disinherit Andrew if he supports the apartment idea." "And him?" "What does he say?" "Nothing definite. Agrees with his mother one moment, says we need to think the next." I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes for a second. Grandmother's face appeared before me, calm, wise, with a slight smile at the corners of her lips. What would she do in this situation? "Allison, do you have somewhere to stay tonight? A friend, maybe?" "Yes. Mia, my colleague from the flower shop, but I don't want to drag anyone in." "Then come to me. I have a guest room. Stay the night, and in the morning with a fresh head we'll think." "Really, can I?" Hope sounded in her voice. "Of course, waiting for you." I hung up and went to prepare the guest room. Mentally, I was already making a plan of action. Tomorrow, Vincent Michaels comes with grandmother's secret. Then need to meet with the house manager, clarify details on the apartment for Allison, and also I decided to call my business partners. Maybe they can offer some job for Andrew, real work, not another scam. It will be a tough day, but somehow I felt confident. Grandmother didn't just leave me houses, she left me the opportunity to change life, mine and others. And I was going to use it. The next morning started with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and quiet footsteps in the kitchen. I opened my eyes and didn't immediately recall yesterday's events. Glancing at the clock, 8 in the morning, I threw on a robe and left the bedroom. Allison was bustling at the stove, eggs sizzled in the pan. Toasts were already on the table, and the coffee maker emitted a mind-blowing aroma. "Good morning," she smiled. "Hope you don't mind me taking over here." "Not at all." I sat at the table, watching how deftly she managed in the kitchen. "Didn't know you cook so well." "Grandma taught me." Allison dished out the omelette onto plates. She was a cook at the Narrow Resort. "Always said a good morning starts with a good breakfast." We ate in cozy silence, looking out the window at the morning city. The day promised to be sunny despite the April chill. "How are you?" I asked finally. "Better," Allison thoughtfully stirred her coffee. "Andrew called 3 times yesterday. First yelled, then asked me to come back, then suggested a compromise." "And what have you decided?" "Nothing yet. Told him I need time to think. He's not used to that answer." She smiled faintly. "Usually I either agree right away or just stay silent. And here suddenly my own opinion." Her face showed an expression of surprise, as if she herself didn't expect such boldness from herself. The doorbell interrupted our conversation. I looked at the clock. 9:30. Vincent Michaels always arrived a bit early. "That's probably grandmother's lawyer," I said to Allison. "We have an important talk." "I'll go, won't interfere." She started clearing the dishes from the table. "No need. You can sit in the living room or rest in the room. It's bad for you to get nervous in your condition." Opening the door, I saw not only Vincent Michaels, a tall, grey-haired man in a strict suit, but 2 strangers. A young man with a folder of documents and a plump, middle-aged woman with an unfriendly expression. "Good morning, Taylor Thompson." Vincent Michaels looked tense. "Sorry for the unanticipated company, but representatives from the Inheritance Affairs Commission are here for you." They insisted on a joint visit. I immediately understood what commission this was. Lorraine Peterson hadn't wasted time. "Come in." I opened the door wider, letting all 3 into the hallway. We settled in the living room. Allison, casting me a questioning glance, quietly retreated to the guest room. "So," began the woman, who introduced herself as Zoe Ferguson, a specialist in inheritance disputes. "We've received a statement about possible violations in drafting the will of citizen Evelyn Rose. The applicant's claim pressure was exerted on her, and her mental state didn't allow adequate decisions." "Who are the applicants?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That's confidential information," Zoe Ferguson cut off. But Vincent Michaels interjected. "Lorraine Peterson and Andrew Nicholas Peterson," he said firmly. "And we all know that's complete nonsense." Evelyn Rose had opinions from 3 independent medical commissions on her full capacity. Documents can be falsified, parried Zoe Ferguson. Just like your authority, Vincent Michaels responded unexpectedly sharply. May I see your ID? The woman hesitated, then reluctantly pulled out some card. Vincent Michaels examined it carefully. Taylor Thompson, he addressed me. Ms. Zoe Ferguson works at the law firm Family Law. It's a private organization, not a government body. She has no authority to conduct inspections or demand documents. Zoe Ferguson's face turned crimson. We're acting in the family's interests, she objected, and we have every reason to request case materials through court. Vincent Michaels replied unmoved. If you have doubts about the will's legality, file a lawsuit. And now I ask you to leave my client's apartment. The young man accompanying Zoe Ferguson clearly felt awkward. He hadn't even opened his folder. Let's go, Zoe Ferguson, he said quietly. Indeed, we need to prepare a lawsuit first. The woman shot me a scorching glance, but still stood up. We'll be back, she promised, with a court order. When the door closed behind them, Vincent Michaels sighed wearily. Sorry for this scene, Taylor Thompson. They caught me at the entrance and practically forced their way. No problem, Vincent Michaels. I guessed Lorraine Peterson wouldn't back off so easily. They really can sue, warned the lawyer, but they have no chance. Evelyn Rose was very foresighted. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. Here's what I mentioned yesterday. Your grandmother asked to give this to you personally if problems arise with the inheritance. I took the envelope. On it, in grandmother's handwriting, Tay, open when the time comes. What's in it? I asked. I don't know, he shook his head. Evelyn Rose didn't say, but she was sure it would help you deal with any claims. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several photos, a yellowed sheet of paper, and a USB drive. The photos showed a young Lorraine Peterson with some unfamiliar man. They stood embracing against a sea background. In another shot, they sat in a restaurant holding hands. I turned over one photo. On the back, in grandmother's handwriting, Lorraine and Oliver. Miami, 1987. Who's Oliver? I asked, but Vincent Michaels just shrugged. No idea, but judging by the date, it was before Andrew's birth. I unfolded the sheet of paper. It turned out to be a letter addressed to Lorraine, signed by this Oliver. Judging by the content, they had very close relations, and he asked her to divorce her husband so they could be together. Interesting, I murmured. So Lorraine Peterson had an affair on the side. Perhaps grandmother kept these materials as insurance, suggested Vincent Michaels. Check what's on the USB. I turned on the computer and inserted the USB. On it was an audio recording. I pressed play and heard grandmother's voice. Tay, if you're listening to this, it means Lorraine has decided to contest my decision after all. I expected that. She's always been greedy for money and property, though she tried to hide it behind talk of family values. On this USB, you'll find a recording of my conversation with her, made 5 years ago, right after Sammy's death. Then she first tried to claim rights to our apartment. I recorded that conversation without her knowledge. An ugly act, but necessary. I think you'll be interested in the part where she admits Andrew might not be the son of his official father. That explains why she's so desperately trying to provide for him materially. Guilt. Use this information wisely, Tay. I'm not urging you to blackmail Lorraine, but if needed to protect yourself, don't hesitate. One more thing. On my 80th birthday, I voluntarily underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. The conclusion is on the USB in the documents folder. I was of sound mind and firm memory when drawing up the will, and I knew exactly what I was doing. Take care of yourself, my girl, and remember, homes should unite people, not divide them. The recording ended, and silence fell in the room. Wow, Vincent Michaels finally said. Evelyn Rose foresaw everything. As always, I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. She was always one step ahead. At that moment, Alison peeked cautiously into the room. Sorry, she said, embarrassed. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I accidentally heard about Andrew. I sighed. The situation was getting more tangled. Come in, sit, I invited. This concerns you too. Alison perched on the edge of the sofa, nervously stroking her belly. So Andrew might not be his father's son. She said it quietly, as if afraid the walls would hear. Apparently, yes. I showed her the photos. Your mother-in-law seems to have led a double life. Alison looked at the pictures for a long time, then raised her eyes to me. You know, this explains a lot. Lorraine Peterson was always obsessed with the idea that Andrew should live better than everyone else, that he deserves special treatment. Now it's clear why. Guilt, I nodded. And what will you do with this information? Alison asked. I pondered. Grandmother had given me a powerful trump card in the game against Lorraine Peterson. Just a hint at the possibility of revealing this secret would be enough to make her back off. But did I want to go that way? Nothing yet, I decided. I'll keep it as a backup option. Maybe Lorraine Peterson will come to her senses without blackmail. Vincent Michaels nodded approvingly. Wise decision. In any case, your legal position is impeccable. If they sue, we'll win. But with such evidence, they unlikely want a public trial. He gathered his papers and stood. I'll prepare all necessary documents in case of a lawsuit. And you, Taylor Thompson, be careful. Lorraine Peterson is a dangerous opponent. When the lawyer left, Alison and I were left alone in the living room. She looked thoughtful and a bit sad. What are you thinking about? I asked. About how you never really know people, she sighed. Here's Lorraine Peterson, always so proper, so principled, constantly talking about morals, family values. And herself. People are more complicated than they seem, I noted, and everyone has their secrets. Alison suddenly straightened up and looked me resolutely in the eyes. I want to rent that apartment in the house on Cherry Street, regardless of what Andrew decides. Are you sure? Yes, I need a place that's mine, where I can decide how to live and what to do, where I can work and raise the child. And Andrew, I'll give him a choice. He can come with me or stay with his mother. It should be his decision. I smiled. I liked this new resolute Alison. Good. I'll call the house manager. We'll draw up all the documents. The phone rang as if on cue. I expected the manager's number, but the screen showed Andrew's name. I showed the phone to Alison. Your husband, I said. Will you talk? She took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, time to dot the I's. I handed her the phone and went to the kitchen so as not to interfere in their conversation. Through the wall came Alison's muffled voice, calm but firm. She no longer seemed scared or uncertain. Interesting how Andrew would react to this new version of his wife. I brewed fresh tea and waited. Whatever Alison and Andrew's decision, I needed to prepare for a new round of confrontation with Lorraine Peterson. She won't back off easily, especially now when she has something to lose. Not only potential wealth, but reputation. 15 minutes later, Alison entered the kitchen. Her face was calm, almost serene. Well, I asked, handing her a cup of tea. I told him I'm renting the apartment on Cherry Street, that I want to live separately from his mother, and that he has to decide who he's with, me and the child or her. And how did he react? First yelled, then silent, then said he needs to think. She smiled faintly. That's already progress. Before, he just obeyed his mother without thinking. I nodded, admiring her resilience. And I also said I'm going back to work, added Alison, and that I need a husband, not a mama's boy. Bold. Scary, she admitted. But right, I have to think about the child, about what example we'll set for him. We finished our tea when the doorbell rang again. This time behind the door was Andrew, disheveled, with red eyes and a determined expression. I need to talk to Alison, he said, shifting from foot to foot. Please. I let him into the apartment and went to the bedroom, leaving the spouses alone. Through the wall came muffled voices, sometimes rising, sometimes fading completely. I didn't listen, giving them a chance to sort it out themselves. An hour later, there was a quiet knock on the bedroom door. I opened it. On the threshold stood Alison and Andrew, holding hands. We've decided to rent the apartment, Alison said together. And I'll find a job, added Andrew. Real work, not these projects. I looked at him more closely. In his eyes was a determination I hadn't noticed before. What will your mother say? I asked directly. Andrew winced. She'll be against, of course, but I have to choose. And I choose my family. He hugged Alison by the shoulders in a protective gesture. We'll manage, he said firmly, together. I nodded, not hiding my surprise. It seems Andrew was capable of independent decision after all. Interesting how long this determination will last when Lorraine Peterson starts pressing him for real. Well then, I said, congratulations on the new home. Let's draw up the documents. The next week flew by in chores. The house manager, Ian Paulson, and I drew up documents for renting the apartment to Alison and Andrew. He, a lean man in his 60s with military bearing, knew grandmother well and treated her decisions with sincere respect. Evelyn Rose was the wisest woman, he said, neatly filling out papers in his calligraphic handwriting. I remember in the 90s, when thugs tried to grab the house, she wasn't scared, went straight to their boss and said something to him. What they talked about, I don't know. But after that, they left us alone. Grandmother knew how to approach people, I agreed, recalling how she resolved conflicts between tenants, neighbors, relatives. Always calmly, always with dignity. And your relatives haven't calmed down? Ian Paulson asked, meaning Lorraine Peterson and company. Quiet for now. I shrugged. But that doesn't mean they've backed off. Ian Paulson hummed, surely gathering strength for a new attack. Such people don't give up easily. He was right. Though a week had passed since Andrew and Alison declared their decision to live separately, and there were no open conflicts. I felt Lorraine Peterson was plotting something. She wasn't one to lose silently. Meanwhile, Alison and Andrew started repairs on the apartment on Cherry Street. I gave them money for materials as a gift for the upcoming housewarming, and they enthusiastically took to it. More precisely, Alison took to it with enthusiasm. Andrew at first looked lost. He'd never done repairs with his own hands before. I don't even have my own hammer, he admitted, embarrassed. No problem, we'll buy one, Alison declared resolutely. Time to become a real man. There was no reproach in her words, only caring guidance. And, to my surprise, Andrew didn't get offended. On the contrary, a new sparkle appeared in his eyes, excitement, interest, desire to learn. I helped them with planning the work. Grandmother once taught me to understand construction matters. Together we chose wallpaper, paint, bathroom tiles. Andrew, who used to brush off such household trifles, now enthusiastically studied catalogues and building store websites. You know, he said to me one day when we were assessing the floor condition in the apartment together, I never thought it was so interesting, creating your own home. Better than trading cryptocurrencies. I couldn't resist a light jab. More honest, he answered unexpectedly seriously, more real. That same day, Andrew himself called his acquaintance builder and arranged for window replacement. Without Alison's prompts, without my help. Just did it. Meanwhile, Alison began reviving her floristry business. Susan Archer, the neighbor with the studio, not only ordered floral compositions for theatrical costumes from her, but also introduced her to the director of a small theater looking for a decorator for a new play. I'll have my own business, Alison said dreamily, laying out sketches on the kitchen table in my apartment, where she and Andrew temporarily lived while repairs were underway. First event decoration, then maybe a small studio. Fire burned in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Pregnancy didn't hinder her work. On the contrary, it seemed to give her strength. She said the baby kicks actively when she works with flowers, as if approving Mom's passion. And Lorraine Peterson, I cautiously asked one evening. Does she know about your plans? Andrew and Alison exchanged glances. She knows, Andrew finally answered. I went to her 3 days ago. Told her everything. And how did she react? First yelled that I'm a traitor, that I succumbed to the influence of this. He hesitated. Anyway, she considers you the main culprit. Then tried to play on pity, that she'll be left alone, that I'm abandoning her in old age. Then started threatening to disinherit me. And you? I said I don't need her inheritance, that I want to build my own life. He smiled faintly. She didn't believe me, said I'd come to my senses when the money runs out. I looked closely at Andrew. He'd changed in this week, paled, thinned, but at the same time seemed to have matured. Seriousness appeared in his eyes that wasn't there before. And if she's right, I asked directly. If it gets tough, then we'll manage, he answered firmly. I got a job. That was news. Where? At a construction firm. For now, on probation in the sales department. Nothing special, but it's real work with a fixed salary and prospects. Alison looked at her husband with pride. He found the vacancy himself and arranged the interview himself, she said, for the first time ever. That evening, when they went to the movies, their first real date in a year. As Alison confessed, I sat in the kitchen thinking about how strangely everything intertwined. Who could have thought that the attempt to take my apartment would lead to this result? Andrew starting to become an independent person, Alison reviving her career, and me. I found something like family. Unexpected, strange, but family. The phone ring interrupted my thoughts. Unfamiliar number. Hello. Taylor Thompson, male voice, quiet, a bit nervous. Sorry for the late call. My name is Oliver Daniel. I was told you wanted to talk to me. I didn't immediately understand who it was. Then I remembered the photos from grandmother's envelope. Oliver, the man with whom Lorraine Peterson had an affair. Who told you? Lorraine, that is Lorraine Peterson, he stumbled. She called me today. Said you found some old photos and are going to use them. So Lorraine Peterson decided to act preemptively. Interesting move. I'm not going to blackmail anyone if that's what you mean, I said calmly. Then why do you need these photos? Tension sounded in his voice. I didn't look for them. They were left to me by grandmother in case problems arise with the inheritance. With the inheritance? He seemed genuinely surprised. What's that got to do with inheritance? Long story, I sighed. In short, Lorraine Peterson is trying to take from me the apartment and other real estate that grandmother left me. Why? She has her own apartment, and a cottage, and Lorraine Peterson thinks it's never enough for her. I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. Silence fell on the other end. Do you know her well? I finally asked. Once I did, Oliver answered slowly. We met at a resort in Miami in '87. I was a grad student, she, a young married woman. We had an affair, stormy, passionate. I suggested she leave her husband, start a new life, but she refused. Yes, old pain sounded in his voice. She chose stability. Her husband was a promising scientist. He had an apartment in Chicago, good job. And I was just a grad student from Boston. Did you keep in touch after that? For a couple of years. Then I went to work abroad in Germany, returned only in the early 2000s. We met by chance at a conference. She was already different, tough, calculating. And her son? I asked the main question directly. Oliver paused. She never said directly. But yes, there's a possibility that Andrew is my son. The dates match. Would you like to meet him? I don't know, he answered honestly. So many years have passed. I'm not sure I have the right to burst into his life like that. We talked a few more minutes. Oliver turned out to be a university professor, specialist in American literature. He lived alone, never married. Once he really loved Lorraine, but now it was just a distant memory. What are you going to do with these photos? He asked at the end of the conversation. Nothing, I replied. They'll stay with me as evidence in case Lorraine Peterson decides to take it to court, but I'm not going to make them public. Thank you. His voice noticeably softened. And tell Andrew. No, don't tell anything. It's not my business. After this conversation, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Thought about the strangeness of life, about human decisions that determine fates for many years ahead. Lorraine Peterson chose stability over love, and as a result spent her life in constant fear that the truth would come out. Maybe that's why she so strove to control Andrew, protecting not so much him as her secret. In the morning, I was woken by a knock at the door. On the threshold stood a breathless Ian Paulson. Taylor Thompson, such a thing, he blurted out, barely catching his breath. At the house on Cherry Street, bailiffs came. What bailiffs? I couldn't believe my ears. Judicial, with an order to seize property, say the house is subject to confiscation for non-payment of taxes. I quickly dressed and we hurried across the street. At the house on Cherry Street stood 2 official cars and alarmed tenants crowded. 2 men in uniform were explaining something to Susan Archer, who looked completely lost. What's going on? I approached them. Are you the owner? Asked one of the bailiffs. Yes, Taylor Thompson. Here, familiarize yourself. He handed me a paper. Court order on imposing interim measures in the form of arresting real property. I scanned the document. It looked official. Seals, signatures, references to law articles, but something was off. Wait, I said. It says the suit was filed by the tax authority, but in the last 5 years there were no tax claims. We paid everything on time. There are receipts. They don't tell us who and why files suits, the bailiff shrugged. Our job is to execute court decisions. Court decision. I looked more closely at the date. But it says the ruling was issued yesterday. I didn't receive any summons, wasn't notified of the court hearing. That's a procedural violation. The bailiff frowned. Listen, we're just doing our job. And I'm doing mine, I replied firmly. And now I'll call my lawyer, then the judicial department, because this… I waved the paper, looks like a gross violation of the law. I dialed Vincent Michael's number. He answered immediately, as if waiting for my call. I'm all ready. Aware, he said, not letting me explain the situation. Called from the house on Cherry Street. This is complete nonsense, Taylor Thompson. There was no court hearing. I checked. The case number listed doesn't exist in the registry. So the documents are fake? I couldn't believe my ears. Looks like it. Ask the bailiffs to show ID and don't sign any papers. I'm on my way. I handed the phone to the bailiff. Talk to my lawyer. The bailiff reluctantly took the phone. As the conversation went on, his face changed from confident to alarmed, then frightened. Yes, I understand. No, they just gave us the writ. Yes, we'll check. He returned the phone and looked confusedly at his colleague. Some mistake here. Seems we need to contact management. They stepped aside and started calling someone. The tenants, watching this scene, gradually calmed down. Susan Archer approached me and shook my hand. Well done, Tay. Didn't lose your cool. Evelyn Rose would be pleased. Half an hour later, Vincent Michaels arrived, and soon after him a real representative from the Judicial Bailiff Service, called by the fake bailiff's superiors. Document checks began, reports drawn up, witnesses questioned. By lunch, the situation cleared up. The bailiffs turned out to be employees of a private security firm, hired by someone for this performance. The documents were a skillful forgery. If I hadn't been alert and called the lawyer, they could have sealed the house and not let tenants in, creating a mass of problems. Who do you think is behind this? Vincent Michaels asked when we were alone. Guess in 3 tries, I smirked bitterly. Lorraine Peterson won't calm down until she gets hers. This is beyond the pale, the lawyer shook his head, forging official documents, exceeding authority. Smells like a criminal case. Can you prove her involvement? Unlikely, she probably acted through proxies. But the fact of fraud is documented. That's the main thing. When finally this whole story with the bailiffs ended, I returned to my apartment completely exhausted. Brewed strong tea, sat by the window and looked at the house across. My house, grandmother's house. The house where people lived who trusted grandmother and now trust me. I recalled her words. Homes should unite people, not divide them. Today this house really united people. Neighbors supported each other, helped, together stood against injustice. Maybe that was grandmother's intent. Not just to leave me valuable property, but to pass on this special atmosphere of unity and mutual support. The phone vibrated. Message from Allison. We heard everything. You okay? We'll be soon. Bringing pizza and something calming. I smiled. Yes, I'm okay. Because now I'm not alone. In the evening, when Allison and Andrew came with the promised pizza, we settled in the kitchen and I told them about everything that happened. About Oliver's call, about the fake bailiffs, about the forged documents. Andrew listened, frowning, and in his eyes gradually appeared an expression I hadn't seen before. A mix of shame and determination. This is all Mom, he said when I finished. No doubt. She called me this morning, spoke in riddles, that soon everything will change, that I'll regret my choice. She won't stop, I sighed. At least not now. We have to do something. Allison placed her hand on her belly, as if protecting the future child from all this story. This is crossing all boundaries. Andrew stared silently out the window, where twilight was gathering, then suddenly stood up, resolutely straightening his shoulders. I'll talk to her. Seriously, talk one-on-one. Are you sure? Allison asked with anxiety. She'll manipulate, pressure. I'm no longer the boy who can be manipulated, Andrew answered unexpectedly firmly. Time to end this circus. Alison and I exchanged glances. We hadn't seen him so determined. Good, I nodded, but don't reveal all cards at once. And I hesitated. There's something else you should know. What exactly? I looked at Alison, seeking support. She nodded barely noticeably. It concerns your father, I began cautiously. What about him? Andrew tensed. He died 10 years ago. I mean, perhaps the man you thought was your father wasn't biologically. The room plunged into heavy silence. Andrew looked at me as if I'd said something in an unfamiliar language. What? What do you mean? I told him about the photos, the letter, the conversation with Oliver. Tried to speak carefully, choosing words, but the truth still sounded like a blow. With each phrase, Andrew's face grew paler. This can't be true, he finally squeezed out. Mom would never. Andrew, Alison said softly, taking his hand. We all make mistakes, and all have the right to. To what? He sharply pulled his hand away. To lies, to deception. That's lasted 30 years. He stood and started pacing the kitchen from wall to wall like a caged animal. If this is true, if this Oliver is really my father, why did she never say? Why hide? Maybe she was afraid, I suggested, afraid of judgment, loss of status. At that time, divorces weren't approved, and giving birth to a child from another man. And this man, he knows. Andrew stopped, looking at me with a lost gaze. He suspects, I answered honestly, but was never sure. Your mother didn't tell him directly. Andrew sank into the chair, clutching his head. All my life, he muttered. All my life she preached to me about honesty, principles, traditions. And all this time, Alison approached him and hugged his shoulders. This changes nothing, Andrew. You remain yourself, and the child and I love you. Not for your parents, but for who you are. He raised his head. Tears stood in his eyes, probably for the first time in many years. I have to find out the truth, he said quietly. The whole truth. And hear it from Mom. Tomorrow, Alison said resolutely. You're too agitated today. We all need to sleep and gather our thoughts. That's what we decided. Andrew called his mother and arranged a meeting for the next day. We sat a bit more, discussing conversation strategy. Then Andrew and Alison went to the guest room, and I stayed in the kitchen alone with my thoughts. I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, it was hard to be the cause of such shocks. On the other, it seemed everything was finally moving towards some resolution. Like an abscess that had been brewing long, finally ready to burst, bringing pain first, then relief. In the morning, Andrew looked collected and determined. He put on his best suit, not the flashy brand new one he preferred before, but a strict dark blue one that made him look older and more serious. Are you sure you want to go alone? Alison asked, seeing him to the door. Sure, he kissed her. This is a conversation I have to have myself. When he left, Alison admitted she was worried. Lorraine Peterson is a very strong woman, she said. All her life she controlled Andrew. I don't know if he can stand up to her now. He's changed, I objected. In these 2 weeks, he's become a completely different person. Yes, but Alison nervously twisted the end of her braid. What if she takes the upper hand again, finds his weak spot? To distract from anxious thoughts, we busied ourselves. I sorted grandmother's documents, organizing folders with receipts and contracts. Alison worked on sketches of floral compositions for the theatre. Time passed, and no call or message from Andrew. Maybe call him. Alison couldn't stand it around 2 in the afternoon. Let's wait a bit more, I suggested. Such conversations can drag on. But by 3 we both were restless. Alison dialed Andrew's number, but the phone was unavailable. She left a message and started pacing the apartment again, glancing out the window. Something's wrong, she said. I feel it, we should go there. Where? To Lorraine Peterson, I know the address. I hesitated. On one hand, Andrew made it clear he wanted to handle this himself. On the other, Alison looked truly alarmed, and in her condition worrying was bad. Okay, I decided. Let's go. In the end, nothing terrible if we just drop by. We called a taxi, and half an hour later, we're at Lorraine Peterson's house. Massive pre-war buildings on Michigan Avenue. Going up to the 5th floor, we rang the bell. The door was opened by the housekeeper, an elderly woman with a displeased face. "The mistress isn't receiving anyone," she cut off, trying to close the door. "Wait." Alison held the door with her hand. "We're looking for Andrew. He should be here." "No Andrew here," the housekeeper frowned. "And hasn't been today." "How hasn't been?" Alison paled. "He left for his mother's 4 hours ago. Lorraine Peterson has been alone all day. She has a migraine, not receiving anyone." The woman tried to close the door again. "We need to talk to her," I said firmly. "It concerns her son." "Kathy, who's there?" Lorraine Peterson's voice came from inside the apartment. "Some women," the housekeeper replied. "Talking about Andrew." Footsteps sounded, and Lorraine Peterson appeared in the hallway in a silk robe with perfect hairstyle and makeup. For someone with a migraine, she looked too composed. "You." She measured me with a contemptuous glance. "And you," that to Alison. "What do you want?" "Where's Andrew?" Alison asked directly. "He went to you this morning." "To me?" Lorraine Peterson feigned surprise. "First I'm hearing of it." "We didn't arrange any meeting. He called you yesterday evening," Alison insisted. "And you agreed to meet today at 11. "Nothing of the sort," Lorraine Peterson cut off. "My son didn't call me, and if he did, I wouldn't meet him. Not after he betrayed his own mother for—" She swept Alison with a contemptuous glance. "For this." Alison flinched as from a blow. "You're lying," she said quietly. "He talked to you. I was nearby, I heard." "Who knows what you misheard, girl?" Lorraine Peterson smirked. "Maybe in your condition, you're already hallucinating." I felt boiling with anger. "Enough, Lorraine Peterson. Where's Andrew? If you've done something, what could I do to my own son?" She raised her eyebrows. "Come to your senses, Taylor. You've completely lost your head with your inheritance." "Then why is his phone unavailable?" Alison asked, pulling out her mobile. "Why doesn't he answer messages?" "No idea," Lorraine Peterson shrugged. "Maybe he finally came to his senses and went somewhere to collect himself away from bad influence." In her eyes flashed something strange, either anxiety or irritation. I realized she wasn't telling the truth. Not fully, at least. "We'll look for him," I said firmly. "And if it turns out you're involved in his disappearance—" "Disappearance?" Lorraine Peterson theatrically threw up her hands. "What drama? An adult man not in touch for a few hours and you're already panicking. Maybe his phone just died. Or he met old friends. Or decided to unwind." "Andrew isn't like that," Alison objected. "He'd warn." "You know him so well?" Lorraine Peterson asked with a venomous smile. "You've been married only 2 years, and I raised him for 30. Believe me, he's capable of surprises. We're leaving." I took Alison's hand, seeing how she paled from this skirmish. "But we'll look for Andrew, and if you know something—" "I know nothing," Lorraine Peterson cut off. "And I advise you not to bother me anymore. I have enough connections to cause you problems. Real problems, not your invented dramas with disappearances." She slammed the door right in our faces. We went down the elevator and out to the street. Alison looked completely exhausted. "She knows where he is," she said, convinced. "I'm sure. And something's wrong. Andrew would never just disappear without warning me. I believe you." I squeezed her hand. "Let's think where he could have gone." We sat on a bench in the park across from the house and started listing options. Friends? But Andrew had no close friends, only business acquaintances he hardly communicated with lately. Relatives? Closest relatives on his side are aunt in the suburbs, but they saw each other once every few years. Work? But he just recently got hired, hadn't even started officially. Maybe he did go to his mother, but she didn't accept him, and he decided to wait somewhere, I suggested, in some cafe or park. Possible, Alison pondered. But then why is the phone off? He knows I'll worry. At that moment her phone rang. Unfamiliar number. Alison grabbed the receiver. Andrew. She listened for a few seconds, her face changing from hope to bewilderment, then to alarm. Yes, that's me." "How? What happened?" She covered her mouth with her hand. "Which hospital?" When she finished the call, she looked as if about to faint. "Andrew's in the hospital," she exhaled. "Accident. He was hit by a car when crossing the road not far from here, on Michigan Avenue, around noon." "How serious is it?" I felt my back go cold. Concussion, broken leg, bruises. Allison trembled. He's unconscious or was unconscious. I don't know. A nurse called. She found my number in his phone. Let's go immediately. I was already raising my hand to stop a taxi. Which hospital? Northwestern Memorial. The whole way to the hospital, Allison was silent, tightly squeezing my hand. I saw her lips moving soundlessly, either praying or talking to the unborn child, calming him and herself. In the emergency department, a nurse met us. A young woman with a tired but kind face. "Are you Sokolov's relatives?" she asked. "I'm the wife." Allison stepped forward. "How is he?" "Stable," the nurse replied. "Came to an hour ago. Concussion, fracture of the fibula, multiple bruises, but nothing threatens life. Can we see him?" "Only for 5 minutes. He's very weak." We were led to the intensive care ward. Andrew lay on the bed, pale, with bandaged head and casted leg. Seeing Allison, he smiled weakly. "Hi," he whispered. "Sorry I scared you." Allison ran to him, carefully took his hand. "What happened? Who did this?" "I didn't see." Andrew spoke with difficulty. "Left Mum's upset, didn't notice the car. Black SUV, I think." "You talked to her?" I asked quietly, approaching closer. "With Lorraine Peterson?" "Yes," he closed his eyes. "She denied everything. Said it's slander, that I have no right to doubt. Even showed some old letters from Dad. That is from the man I thought was Dad." And then we argued. I said I want to do a DNA test. She flew into a rage, started yelling that I'm a traitor, that I'm not her son if I can think that about her. I left, was too upset. "And you were hit by a car," Allison finished. "Yes, almost immediately. I was crossing the road and—" He suddenly frowned, as if remembering something. "You know, it seemed to me the car, like on purpose." At that time, the nurse entered the ward. "Time's up," she said strictly. "The patient needs rest." "One more minute," Allison pleaded. "Please." The nurse nodded reluctantly and left. "Listen," Allison leaned toward Andrew. "Your mother said you didn't come to her today, that you didn't arrange a meeting." "What?" Andrew tried to sit up but winced in pain. "But we talked almost 2 hours. She was definitely home. She denies everything." I shook my head. "Says you had no reason to disappear and we're making it all up." Andrew closed his eyes. "So that's it," he whispered. "So she's decided to go all in. Deny the obvious." "Andrew," I carefully touched his arm. "You said it seemed the car was on purpose." He was silent for a few seconds, then opened his eyes and looked at me with a heavy gaze. "It seemed to me the driver was Victor, Mom's driver. But I'm not sure. Everything happened so fast." Allison and I exchanged glances. Could Lorraine Peterson really go that far? Order her own son hit? To what? Make him silent? Scare? Or was it a warning to us all? "We're not going anywhere," Allison said resolutely. "I'll stay with you in the hospital." "No," Andrew shook his head. "You can't." "The child. Go home, rest. Come tomorrow." He turned to me. Take care of her." "Okay, and be careful. I don't know what Mum's capable of now. She's like gone mad." The nurse appeared in the doorway again, this time more insistently. "That's it, visiting time over. Patient needs rest." We said goodbye to Andrew and left the ward. Allison was pale as a sheet, but held strong. "Do you think it's her?" she asked when we left the hospital. "Lorraine Peterson ordered him hit." "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Don't want to believe a person can do that to their own child. But if it's true," Allison hugged herself as if cold. "Though the day was warm. If she really— What do we do?" "First, report to the police." I decided. About the hit and run, that Andrew saw Lorraine Peterson's driver behind the wheel. "Let them investigate." "And she denies everything," Allison smirked bitterly, "and comes out dry again." "Not necessarily." I pulled out my phone. "There are many surveillance cameras along Michigan Avenue. If the hit is recorded, if the license plate can be determined." "Do you think she didn't foresee that?" "Maybe, but we have to try." We went to the police station and filed a report on the hit and run. The duty officer listened with a bored look, recorded statements, and promised to take measures. It was obvious our case didn't arouse much enthusiasm in him. When we returned home, Allison looked completely exhausted. I made her eat and lie down to rest, and I sat by the window looking at the evening city. Anxious thoughts swirled in my head. If Lorraine Peterson really went that far, ordered her own son hit, it means she's crossed all imaginable boundaries. Means she's dangerous to Andrew, to Allison, to me, to the unborn child. And what to do with such a person? Going to the dresser, I opened the top drawer and took out grandmother's folder with compromising materials on Lorraine Peterson. Maybe time to use this trump card. But what if it only worsens the situation? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Unfamiliar number. Hello. Taylor Thompson, male voice, vaguely familiar. This is Oliver, Oliver Daniel. We talked the other day. Yes, I remember. I tensed. Something happened. Lorraine called me. She's in a strange state. Said something about Andrew, about an accident. I thought you could explain. Andrew was hit by a car, I replied. He's in the hospital, and there's suspicion it wasn't an accident. Heavy silence on the other end. You're hinting, Oliver began but didn't finish. I'm not asserting anything. But Andrew thought he saw Lorraine Peterson's driver behind the wheel. Lord, Oliver exhaled. What has she come to? Do you know where she is now? Home, I think. When she called, said she's locked herself in and not letting anyone in. She said strange things about everyone betraying, that no one can be trusted, that she'll take care of everything herself. A shiver ran through me. What do you mean? I don't know, he answered honestly, but she sounded inadequate. I thought you should know just in case. Thanks for the warning. And also, Oliver paused, I'd like to visit Andrew if possible. I think it's possible. I was surprised. You want to tell him? I don't know, he admitted again, but I have to see him, at least from afar. Just make sure he's okay. Come tomorrow to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, visiting hours from 2 to 5. Thank you. His voice trembled. And take care of yourselves. All of you. Lorraine now. She's not herself. I hung up and pondered. What do these words mean? Take care of everything herself. What else could she be plotting? Going to the guest room door, I quietly opened it. Allison was fast asleep, curled up, hand on her belly, as if guarding her child even in sleep. I carefully closed the door and returned to the kitchen. Whatever Lorraine Peterson is plotting, I need to be on guard, for all of them. Morning started with an early call from Vincent Michaels. The news was alarming. Lorraine Peterson filed 3 lawsuits at once, to declare Evelyn Rose's will invalid, to declare me an unfair heir, and to deprive Andrew and Allison of parental rights, though the child isn't even born yet. This is legal absurdity, the lawyer assured. But she attached a certificate from some acquaintance psychiatrist that Allison is allegedly incapable of raising a child, and the case is set for hearing next week already. So fast? I was surprised. Connections again. The judge, Lorraine Peterson's old friend. Allison and I went to the hospital to visit Andrew, but an unpleasant surprise awaited us. At the department entrance stood a guard who didn't let us in. Patient in serious condition, he said. Visits restricted for medical reasons. Fortunately, the familiar nurse discreetly beckoned us and explained the situation. Lorraine Peterson came in the morning with some important official from the health department, after which an order appeared to let only the mother see Andrew. He's very upset, added the nurse, and passed a note from Andrew. Mum got temporary guardianship over me as over an incapacitated due to injury. This is total nonsense, but she has connections. She wants to transfer me to a private clinic. Don't allow. Afraid she'll use all this to get to the child. Remember, I love you and am fully competent. Be careful. And we decided to act quickly. Through grandmother's friend Mary Stevens's acquaintance, we contacted Professor Stein, a renowned neurologist impossible to intimidate or bribe. I'll be at the hospital in an hour, he promised, and if your Andrew is really okay, I'll write such a conclusion that no guardianship will hold. In the hospital we had to overcome administration resistance, but with the eminent professor's appearance, doors opened. Stein conducted a thorough examination of Andrew with the chief doctor and made an unambiguous conclusion. I can state with full responsibility, the patient is fully oriented, logical thinking intact, memory preserved. Mild concussion didn't affect his mental functions. No objective medical indications for establishing guardianship. The chief doctor was clearly displeased, but couldn't argue with the professor's authority. Alison declared her decision to take her husband home, and the discharge process began. When we were already leaving the hospital, Lorraine Peterson appeared at the gates. "Where are you going?" She blocked our way. "Andrew must stay in the hospital. I, as his official guardian, forbid it." "That no longer applies." Alison handed her the professor's conclusion. "Here's the document that Andrew is fully capable and doesn't need guardianship." "This is a fake," Lorraine Peterson indignated. "My son is seriously injured. He needs rest." "Enough lies, Mom," Andrew said calmly. "All your life you've lied to me about my father, about your principles, about everything." "What are you talking about?" She paled. "About my real father, Oliver, the man you had an affair with in Miami in '87, from whom you possibly gave birth to me and then hid the truth all your life." Lorraine Peterson froze, then slowly sank onto the bench. "You shouldn't have found out," she whispered. "Never. It was a youthful mistake." "But is it true? I'm not Nicholas Peters' son?" "I don't know." She covered her face with her hands. "I never did a test, didn't want to know for sure." At that moment, our taxi pulled up. Andrew straightened, leaning on a crutch. "Goodbye, Mom. I don't want more lies, no manipulations. I'll live my life and raise my child as I see fit." "Andrew, don't go. You're all I have." "No, Mom, I'm not all you have. I'm a separate person with my own life, my family. And it's time you understood that." We got in the taxi and drove away, leaving Lorraine Peterson at the hospital gates. "You okay?" Alison asked quietly, taking Andrew's hand. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but it seems for the first time in 30 years I made my own choice. And it's liberating." When we arrived at my apartment, I suddenly realized the circle had closed. Exactly 2 weeks had passed. Since Lorraine Peterson declared she was giving me 2 weeks to pack. Fate sometimes has a strange sense of humor. 6 months passed. Golden autumn slowly retreated, giving way to first colds. Leaves from maples in the yard of the house on Cherry Street fell, covering the ground with a multicolored carpet. I stood at the window of my apartment, watching evening lights turn on in the house across. In recent months, this became my ritual, greeting sunset, looking at the house grandmother entrusted to me. The apartment on the second floor with the bay window overlooking the Linden Park now looked completely different. Andrew and Alison finished repairs by summer's end, shortly before little Michael's birth, a sturdy boy with clear, attentive eyes. They completely transformed the space: light walls, large windows without heavy curtains, wooden floors sanded and covered with matte varnish. In the nursery tones of sky and sea, wooden crib made to special order, and a rocking chair where Alison fed the baby. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. On the threshold stood Susan Archer with a large box in hands. "Taylor, dear, brought pies. Just out of the oven with cabbage and mushrooms, as your grandmother liked." I accepted the treat gratefully. "You going to the baby?" Susan Archer asked. "I'm going too, bringing a rattle for Mikey. Made it myself from different scraps. Of course, I'll go soon. Just dress warmer." We entered the house on Cherry Street together. The entrance smelled of fresh paint. The lobby repair had recently finished. New floor tiles, restored railings, mirrors back in antique frames. All this gave the house a special atmosphere of dignity, not pompous, but cozy, homey. On the second floor, Andrew met us, matured, with a short, neat beard, already showing first grey. Crutch long unnecessary, though in damp weather the leg sometimes reminded of itself. "Come in," he invited hospitably. "Mike just fell asleep, but Alison will be glad to see you." The apartment filled with aromas of baking and home comfort. Alison sat in an armchair by the window, sorting flowers for a new composition. Seeing us, she stood and hugged each. Motherhood made her even more beautiful. Not that glossy beauty from magazine covers, but some inner deep, like light coming from within. "How good you came," she smiled. "I was just finishing work for the theatre, then thought to have tea. And Mikey will wake soon." We settled in the kitchen, where modern appliances harmoniously combined with an antique buffet preserved from pre-war times and carefully restored. Andrew brewed tea in a large porcelain teapot I gave them for housewarming. and we began conversing leisurely. "How's your work, Andy?" Susan Archer asked. "Like it?" "Very." He nodded with genuine enthusiasm. "Never thought construction could be such interesting business. We're now doing restoration of old buildings downtown, returning their historical look, but with modern conveniences." "And management doesn't pressure?" I inquired, knowing how hard it was for him to adjust to hierarchy after years of freelancing. "Happens, of course," Andrew smiled. "But we have a good team, and I'm learning a lot. By the way, the director hinted possible promotion by New Year. I'll lead my own group." "Wonderful," I sincerely rejoiced. We discussed latest news. Alison's floral compositions had such success in the theatre that she was offered to decorate all premieres in the new season. Susan Archer got an order for costumes for a historical film. At the house on Lake Michigan, major repairs finished, and now we could spend weekends there. "And you, Taylor, how's the new project?" Alison asked. "Progressing." I smiled. "The catering company is reaching a new level. Now not only corporate events, but weddings, anniversaries. And by the way, I hired 2 new employees, young guys from culinary college, talented, but they need a chance." "Like grandmother," Andrew noted. "She always gave people a chance too." I nodded, feeling a warm wave of gratitude to Evelyn Rose. She taught me the most important: see in others not a means, but an end. Help not for gain, but because otherwise impossible. Quiet cry came from the bedroom. Michael woke up. Alison stood, but Andrew beat her to it. "I'll bring him. You rest." A minute later he returned with the baby in arms. Michael, sleepy and warm, curiously examined those gathered. In his features, something of both parents showed, but there was also something completely his own, special. "Oh, what a handsome." Susan Archer admired. "A real man growing." "Yes, character already showing," Andrew said with pride, stubborn, curious. I watched how he held his son gently but confidently, how he talked to him calmly and with respect, and thought how unlike he was to that spoiled, infantile person he was just half a year ago. Fatherhood awakened something real, deep in him. When Alison took Mike to feed him, Andrew and I went out to the small balcony for a smoke. Though he quit the habit with his son's birth, sometimes allowed himself one cigarette for a heart-to-heart talk, as he said. "You know," he said, looking at the evening city, "I recently met with Oliver." "Really?" I was surprised. After the hospital story, they met only a couple times, and briefly. "Yes. We went to the Art Institute, then sat in a cafe, talked about literature, about life. He's an interesting person, and we're similar in many ways, turns out." "Did you do the test?" I asked cautiously. "Yes," Andrew nodded. "He's my biological father. Now it's certain." "And how do you feel?" "Strange," he smiled, "but good. Like found a missing part of myself. You know, he always suspected but never interfered in my life. Respected Mom's choice." "And she, Lorraine Peterson? Have you communicated with her?" Andrew's face became serious. "She called several times. First threatened, then cried, demanded, begged, and a month ago sent a letter, real, paper one." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Here, want to read?" I took the letter and carefully unfolded the sheet. "Dear Andrew, forgive me for everything, for the lies, for the control, for trying to manage your life. I thought I did it out of love, but now I understand it was fear. Fear of losing you. Fear you'd learn the truth. Fear of being alone. I got so tangled in my lies that I started believing them myself. And only now, left truly alone, I begin to see what harm I caused you, myself, everyone around. Not asking forgiveness. No, I don't deserve it. Just want you to know. I repent and will wait if you ever want to talk. With love, Mom." I returned the letter to Andrew. "Did you reply?" "Not yet." He carefully folded the sheet and put it in the envelope. "I'm thinking, this isn't just words. It's a decision that will affect all of us. Alison, Mike, our whole family. And what will it be?" "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I no longer fear this decision, don't fear responsibility. And that's the main thing." We returned to the apartment. Alison was finishing feeding Mike, who blissfully snuffled, sated. Susan Archer was telling some amusing story about the theatre director. A full moon peeked in the window, flooding the room with soft silvery light. Stay for dinner? Alison asked. I made a casserole from grandmother's recipe. I gladly agreed. I liked these family evenings, filled with warmth and peace. Liked seeing Alison bloom, Andrew mature, Mike grow. Over dinner, we discussed future plans. Alison dreamed of opening a small floristry studio right in the house. There was a free room on the first floor, ideal for it. Andrew talked about wanting to do his own projects eventually, restoring historical buildings while preserving authenticity. And you, Tay? Andrew asked. What are your plans? I pondered. Recent months were full of chores, helping the young family, business development, resolving inheritance issues. Vincent Michaels brilliantly won the court case, and all Lorraine Peterson's claims were rejected. The house on Lake Michigan restored and ready for guests. What next? You know, I said finally, I think to continue grandmother's work, not just preserve these houses, but develop them, create space where people feel good together, where history, culture, mutual aid are valued. Great idea, Andrew perked up. I could help with the technical side. I already have contacts with good restorers. And I could handle decoration, Alison chimed in, make the houses cozier, more beautiful. So over dinner was born the new project, Homes with History. We decided to start with the house on Cherry Street, restore the facade, recover historical details, organize a music studio in the basement for kids from neighboring houses. Then move to the house on Lake Michigan, make it a summer residence for artists, writers, musicians who could live and work there, enjoying nature. Evelyn Rose would be pleased, Susan Archer said as we said goodbye at the door. She always said a real home isn't just walls, it's people who create something together. Yes, I agreed. Grandmother was right, as always. Returning to my apartment across the street, I stopped midway and looked back at the house with white columns. Warm light burned in the windows, quiet laughter came from an open vent. The house lived its calm, dignified life, as for many decades before. I recalled that day when Lorraine Peterson came to kick me out of the apartment. Giving you 2 weeks to pack, she declared then with a smug smile. 2 weeks that changed everything. 2 weeks that forced each of us to choose, stay the same or change, live in the past. Or future. Destroy or create. In the morning, I woke early. Outside the window fell the first snow. Light, almost weightless, it slowly covered the city with a white blanket, hiding imperfections, softening edges, creating a new, clean world. I opened the window and held out my palm, catching snowflakes. They melted, barely touching warm skin, but their cold touch was surprisingly pleasant, like a reminder that life continues, changes, renews. On the table lay an old photo album I'd leafed through last evening. Grandmother in youth beautiful, stately, with smart eyes and light smile. Grandfather next to her in military uniform with medals on chest. My parents quite young, happy, holding hands against a blooming garden background. Me, myself, a little girl with pigtails, sitting on grandmother's lap. And a new photo, taken just a week ago. Me, Andrew, Alison with Mike in arms, Susan Archer, Mary Stevens, other house residents, all together, against the restored entrance background. New family. Not by blood, but by spirit, by choice, by shared values and goals. I closed the album and smiled. Grandmother left me not just houses and apartment. She left me an example of how to live with dignity, how to build relationships, how to create instead of destroy. And I'll try to be worthy of this inheritance. The phone buzzed with a message from Alison. Good morning. Watching the snow, Mike and I are too, come for pancakes for breakfast. We'll plan New Year's holidays. I smiled and started dressing. Ahead was a new day, new affairs, new dreams, and I was ready for them. If you liked the story, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. That motivates us to create new interesting stories every day. We apologize in advance for any errors in pronunciation and accents. All the best, and be happy.